Good morning and welcome to the October 20th Saturday meeting, joint meeting of TV Toastmasters and ACE. For those of you joining us at home, we have a special treat for you today. We're not going to follow our standard meeting format, but today we have a debate between TV Toastmasters and ACE. TV Toastmasters says it in the name. We actually record our meetings and air them on public access television. ACE is known for focusing on evaluations. So it'll be a really exciting meeting to see both of these clubs debate over a very hot topic. To find out more about TV Toastmasters, you can log on to tvtoastmasters.com. And to find out more about ACE, you can log on to 8119.toastmastersclubs.org. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our MC for the day, Ms. Sheila Mudd Baker.
Welcome. The first thing you should know is what we're debating. So the question tonight, or today, is issuing permits for the practice of fracking should be legislated at the federal level. Let me repeat what the issue is. Issuing permits for the practice of fracking should be at the federal level. That's the question that is to be debated. But your first question, if you're at home especially, you're saying, what's fracking? Good question. This is not about whether or not fracking is a good thing or a bad thing, or it's responsible or irresponsible. The question is, should issuing of permits be legislated at the federal level? Now, clearly, in a debate, you're always talking about a change. So it's not currently done at the federal level. So we have an affirmative and a negative group. The affirmative team will argue for issuing permits at the federal level. The negative team will argue for keeping the status quo. Okay. Keatan and Joel, who you will meet in a couple of minutes, are team negative, and they contend that this issue should continue to be decided at the state level. Veronica and Shankar, who you will meet, are team affirmative, and they will argue for a change from the status quo. Now here's a quick background. Wikipedia, we know the source for all things on the internet, defines the technique of fracking as, I love these words, the propagation of fractures in a rock layer as a result of the action of a pressurized fluid. In other words, we're forcing fluids down into the rock layer in order to get out gas or petroleum, okay? And it results in the recovery of hydrocarbons, oil and gas. Now, fracking's been used for a very long time. The current method is fairly recent, but the more modern fracking methods began in 1947. Right now, 32 states have natural gas drillers and who are engaged in fracking. That is, forcing pressure down into the rock and releasing those hydrocarbons. Some states, such as Texas and North Dakota, embrace fracking, and some states ban fracking. So, think about what it is. It is injecting a slurry of water and chemicals into the rock, and then sometimes we add gels, foams, compressed gases, including nitrogen and carbon dioxide, which can be injected. Typically, the fracking fluid is about 95 to 98% water, and then there's water and sand accounting for the rest, additional waters. Fracturing may use, also known as fracking, hydraulic fracturing or fracking, may use 1.2 to 3.5 million U.S. gallons per well of water. That's a lot of water. And large projects quite often use the 5 million gallons. Additional fluid is used when teams are refractured, that wells are refractured. So the same rock may be used again. Once you dig a well, you can go back again and see if you can pull more out of it. Water is the largest component. The initial drilling operation itself, that's the very first drilling, might use anywhere from 6,000 to 600,000 gallons of water. And then it goes up after you've drilled. You add maybe up to 5 million gallons of water. So that's what it is. Fracking is injecting that water and the chemicals and maybe some gases into the rock to release hydrocarbons. Okay, and the question is, they're resolved. Issuing permits for the practice of fracking should be legislated at the federal level. Now, each team has a round, and this means that none of us get to ask questions while people are talking. They get their time, they get to talk, no one interrupts. So I will go through this. Round one is the affirmative, and that is Veronica Sanford. She gets 5 minutes. Now, if it is needed, the negative team might ask for clarification if Veronica says something where we all say, what? If that happens, that team may come up here, and they may ask me to come up here. They get a minute to ask for clarification, and Veronica can clarify. Next, Joel Longstreth gets 5 minutes to do the negative. That is, that he is arguing for the status quo. Again, the other team, if they need a clarification, may ask for it and can come up and ask the question with my permission, and then the other person has a minute. This is only for clarification. So affirmative, negative. Then, round 3 and round 4. Round 3 and round 4 are the other two, affirmative, negative. Got it? So it's pretty simple. Affirmative, negative, affirmative, negative. If there is a need for clarification, the opposite team asks for it, and that team will answer the question. It's a pretty simple thing. Then we have rebuttals, because we had the 4. Then we have rebuttals, 4 people, negative, positive, etc. And at the end, the ballots are collected from the 4 judges that we have here. And then we have audience feedback. So you can ask all the questions you want at that point. You can argue with anybody you want. You can argue with each other. But during the process, just let the people who are giving the presentation, let them talk. Okay. Is everybody ready?
Ready.
Okay. Round 1, Veronica Sanford, 5 minutes. There, we will stop you at exactly 5 minutes. If you do not want to be disqualified, you will stop at 5 minutes. All right, round 1, Veronica Sanford for the affirmative.
Hello, everyone. What the heck are we talking about? And why are we having a debate about it? For some communities, this has become a very emotional and sometimes health-threatening issue. For others who may not be directly affected, we may have heard in the news that fracking causes earthquakes in Ohio. What's the truth? And why does it matter? Fracking, as Sheila has discussed, is the injection of water into the earth, sometimes 2 miles deep, 5,000 to 8,000 feet deep, and then horizontally to extract the methane gas and in some other states the petroleum from the earth. If that were all, life would be bliss. However, just as when you bake a cake, you know you have to assemble all the ingredients. Before you assemble all the ingredients, you have to go to the store and buy some of those ingredients. Then you have to bring them to your kitchen. You have to start to bake your cake. And then, gosh darn, there's all that cleanup afterwards. A lot of the problems that we're discussing is exactly that cleanup process afterwards. Well, how does that relate to state or federal regulations? Well, currently, some argue that the state is not doing a very good job in regulating. Otherwise, why would we be seeing the problems that we're seeing? I will go into some detail on exactly the points that I've raised. Historically, about the 1970s and 1980s, laws were starting to be made about how this whole process would be regulated, and the federal government wanted to regulate it. But in the process, the industry got involved, and in turn, it was decided that the state would be responsible, and that the gas and the petroleum industries would be explicitly exempt from any waste contamination cleanup, which sounds pretty dramatic in retrospect. This is what myself and my partner are going to try to argue to reverse. Back in the day, 1970s and 1980s, we didn't have fracking as we know it today. Fracking as we know it today includes that horizontal portion up to 2 miles out from the initial drilling position. Now, as they drill, they encase it in encasement and cement. And sometimes that cement actually breaks, which can cause problems. Now, as we drill, we are injecting all these chemicals in the water, 60 to 160 tons of chemicals for that water. That's tons of chemicals into that water. And then that water goes to break up that earth so far down. 20 to 30% of that water stays in the ground in our neck of the woods with shale types of gas drilling. In Texas, where there's petroleum, up to 100% will actually also stay in the water, in the ground. What we're concerned about is when there's seepage of that water into our drinking water, the aquifers, where theoretically pure water, well water, should be protected. Now, ideally, that water would stay due to pressure where it was put. And if it was just the fact that we put these water and chemicals down, that would be all right. But it comes back up. That's how we get the methane gas back up. And we collect it. So that water and methane gas comes up, and it's called flowback, or production water. The production water has the gas that we want. It also includes...
Thank you.
Name an effective political leader in history who couldn't speak well. There aren't any.
Because when it comes to a disease,
Freedom requires leadership, and leadership requires oratory. You have to speak to be heard.
I have a dream.
It's all about personal growth and guts.
Never give in. Never, never, never.
Joel Longstreth will argue the negative, that is, for the status quo. Joel Longstreth.
Thank you, Sheila, for providing background and history. Ladies and gentlemen, people from Anderson Township, thank you for providing this venue for us. I would have liked to have heard more about why you think that there should be more regulation at the federal level rather than the way things are being done now. It's a half-truth because a lot of this is being administered by the EPA and some other agencies, which I'll get into in a minute. No matter what side of the issue you come down on, whether you think that fracking should be abolished or whether you think that it's here to stay and you're just looking for the most safe and environmentally responsible way of administering it, I'm afraid that if history's any indication, bringing in a third party might not bring all the benefits that you want or provide the outcome that you're looking for. I'm going to provide a little bit of background, and Keatan will also go into some things about the results that my affirmative team is hoping for. Going way back, the 10th Amendment up to the United States Constitution, which was adopted in 1791, is about federalism. Federalism is also known as states' rights, which is simply that it provides the powers not granted to the federal government nor prohibited to the states by the Constitution are reserved to the states or the people. The big vision with the Constitution was that you would have the federal government and the states would be laboratories where we could try different things to see what worked the best. Now that's still playing out. We had that little war back in the 1860s. Just this week, I don't know how many of you get the Enquirer, but we've had 2 stories above the fold about the tug of war in the states and the federal government being at loggerheads. We had the issue of No Child Left Behind. We had the weekend voting about the election. Some of these things take time to play out. For example, prohibition resulted in not working out at the federal level, and now we have this patchwork quilt of liquor laws throughout the United States. Some of you are old enough to remember the experiment with the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, which didn't work because Montana has certain things that are different about than, say, Rhode Island. I think Sammy Hagar summed it up best where he said, "Take my license, all that jive, I can't drive 55. I could go on and on about the examples of how this is still playing out. As far as the practice of fracking and the whole technology, it's evolving very rapidly. Now, there seems to be no middle ground with this. There's some people like Bill McKibben, the driving force behind 350.org, who says flatly that fossil fuels should stay in the ground, period. So no amount of regulation will be enough for him. There are risks in everything. We all took a risk to get here. We could have been one of the 36,000 fatalities on the road. We're going to take a risk when we leave here. Just bear in mind that aviation and traveling by train were never as safe as they are now. It took an evolution. A lot of people had to die to figure out what was the safest. Right now, it's very easy to report violations to the EPA. And as far as the methane, which is, yeah, admittedly, it's a nasty greenhouse gas, it's in the oil company's best interest to capture that and sell it so you can burn it off in your stove or in your furnace. It's also in their best interest to recycle water. Some places in, I think Cabot Energy in Texas has taken great pride in using 100% recycled water. The business is regulated by the EPA, the Department of Energy, the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. It's regulated by things called the Frack Act, the Breathe Act, and some other things. The EPA watches very closely the 5 phases of water. The state of Ohio went through an extensive spud-to-plug renovation or overhaul of their regulations this past spring. There's 5 things you have to go through to get a permit in Ohio under Revised Code 1509. You have to have a copy of the agreement with your local officials. You have to identify the groundwater you're going to use. Thank you. Okay.
All the education in the world won't help you get ahead in life if you can't express your ideas effectively. Every day, competition for advancement gets tougher and tougher. You need an edge. A Toastmasters Club can give you that edge. A low-cost learning experience for men and women. Toastmasters gives you the confidence to express your ideas to anyone. Get the Toastmasters edge.
Three, we go back to the affirmative. And for the affirmative, Shankar Raswa.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, judges. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Our negative team, Joel and Keatan, Joel made a great point, sort of hiding behind the 11th Amendment, which does not even apply here. I don't know how it's applicable, and it has been proved again and again in the history in the past 100 years through court laws when 10th Amendment is getting confused, when a commerce clause, the U.S. congressional constitutional laws, takes over the 10th Amendment. So clearly fracking, like my teammate explained, Veronica explained, is an interstate commerce. It is not intra-state. There is a big difference. So when fracking is affecting multiple states, congressional power takes over because it is to do with multiple states and even goes outside of the country. So what we are talking really about is interstate commerce and not 11th Amendment. Now, going back to the ill effects of fracking, we all know what happened through the earthquakes in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio. Just between St. Patrick's to the New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2011, there were 11 earthquakes. These were not man-made earthquakes, but these were man-triggered. These were just sleeping under our land, and because of fracking, they sprung up. And states, all they did was they just suspended fracking. They did not even stop. They suspended fracking in that part of the country. What happened in Pennsylvania? The rivers were totally polluted. Several studies have reported radioactive materials in the rivers because the geological foundations below Pennsylvania, 10,000 feet deep, there are radioactive materials such as uranium, and when these guys frack, it comes up. And where does this fracking fluid go? It goes into the Pennsylvania rivers. And what did the state do? The state did not do much until the EPA put its head into the issue and then asked the Department of Pennsylvania Environment Protection Agency to check into the issue and always do tests for these radioactive chemicals in the drinking water. Until then, Pennsylvania did not take much action. Now, interestingly, the states would argue that no, we have come up with very stringent regulations. It ain't so. The reason being, what the states have done is, this is like having babies even before dating. I mean, seriously. Who would have babies even before dating? States would. Especially when it comes to fracking, they did. Without even having proper tests, without even understanding the long-term ill effects of fracking. I understand fracking is good for economy. I'm not against fracking. I'm saying do the proper research about its long-term impacts and then do fracking, see what's good for the people. Like my teammate Veronica explained, the issues with casing, these were never tested before. Why not? States had decades of time to play around with fracking and come up with good rules. They did not. Now it is on the EPA's shoulder that they are doing all these tests, and now they are coming up with a lot of conclusive studies to find where they should have some more stringent regulations. Now, for example, if this had been a federal regulation, if fracking is coming under federal regulation, it would be good. And of course, that's my stand and my team's stand. History tells us this. Look at Detroit. If Detroit auto companies have to adhere to 50 different state regulations for manufacturing their cars and the standards they have to abide to, how difficult it would be and how expensive it will be. But Detroit does not have to do that because it is adhering to the EPA rules on emissions. Now, California is the only state that wanted to take these EPA rules as a foundation and make it even more stricter. So California has even more stringent laws when it comes to pollution, so the other 49 states can adhere to California laws or the EPA rules. Simple for Detroit. The same should be applied for fracking. Federal regulations should take over the laws in fracking. They should be the ultimate authority to issue permits, which makes business easy. It is an interstate business. Business will be simple, cost effective, and that will be our best solution to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for our next speaker, Stanley Glitchner.
Speaking in public doesn't have to be a death sentence. At Toastmasters, we can help you overcome your fears.
Again, we've already had the positive, the negative, the positive, again, the negative. For round 4, Keatan, Suri, the negative.
Thank you, friends, and thank you, Joel, Shankar, Veronica. We heard a lot of things here about fracking, and as Shankar put it in, the federal needs to regulate how fracking is done. I, and my belief, says we should take it to the state level. Isn't EPA enough for us to standardize the legislation at that level? And I would like to repoint the major point that Shankar said. They said California took the laws and made it more stringent. If it was just federal regulated, why would California would have done it? And why would other states follow California for the emissions? Federals do set some kind of a limit, same laws. Let's look at it at a different way. Let's see from a local economy standpoint. How does the economy works when everything is being regulated from federal? And the clear point here comes in our parking law. And I'll just read it out from Wikipedia. Empirical evidence is drawn from government cabinets from history and contemporary evidence. Most often, the minimal size of states most powerful and prestigious body is 5 members. Look at the laws we have formed at federal level. Look at the employment that we are driving to the center. Do we still need those bureaucrats? Do we have to stay under the bureaucracy of the federal environment? Is it, and I'm saying, is it economically good to send everything to the center and you and I may be living in DC? Well, turning back to fracking, right, as my friends pointed, there are different kinds of environments. See, Ohio has a total different landscape than if you go to Florida. And Florida has a total different landscape if you go to Texas. So if you say one cookie cutter law will adhere to all of those, I don't believe it. I would say, since states are where the core R&D is done for our fracking, and I'm not stopping for sharing that information to other states as well. The local R&D setups and local know-how is much more important, and I say it is very much solid as we stand. Talking about Ohio, Ohio has some strict regulations, right? Going back to the same EPA laws about emissions on the cars. Ohio has a very strict sampling laws. You have to sample, if you are in a city limit, you have to sample 300 meters. If you're outside, you have to sample 1500 meters to set up a baseline and then go ahead and start fracking. This ensures that whatever negative effects are there, that can be calculated quantitatively. And we can see the difference if there is any change. Finally, the main point that I want to drive here is the local autonomy, state autonomy. Let me put an analogy, right? And it can be looked at different ways. I'm sure most of us have kids. So if our kids have an argument in a school, do we go to the superintendent of the county? Probably not. We want to solve it there. Teachers understand that problem much better than a superintendent would. But on the other hand side, right, principal gets involved. That is where the state comes in. That is where the local comes in, right? I strongly believe that we should have local laws and we should keep the legislative local. Thank you.
I'd like to begin tonight with a little joke. This guy, he's a farmer, and he says, hey, hello, sorry. But seriously, folks.
Speaking in public is no joke.
Farmer says, a doctor says, chicken says...
For help, call Toastmasters, the public speaking support group.
The chicken...
Welcome back. Now we move to the rebuttal section of the debate. There are 4 persons involved in the rebuttal. We will have first the negative, then the affirmative, then the negative, then the affirmative. Each of these persons will have up to 5 minutes for their rebuttals. Rebuttal number 1 for the negative, Joel Longstreth. Joel Longstreth.
Just a general comment. No matter what you hear today, please look at this as just a jumping off point to do your own research and your own critical thinking. This is a very broad topic. Let's suppose that the affirmative team gets their way. Let's say that the Interstate Commerce Clause does trump everything else, does trump our state's rights. There are some things that the EPA missed, such as in the top flow, at the beginning stages of the flowback, that's when things are about ready to get going. Current regulations, EPA regulations, allow the hydrocarbons to escape from the open hatch during flowback. They don't require degassers or what's called gas busters, and it's not mandated at any level. So inspection is going to miss some things. They're all human beings. Heard a lot about these earthquakes up around Youngstown. I would encourage you to take the time to look at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources report on what happened at North Star 1. That's the well that supposedly was the culprit in all this. The results are inconclusive. I'm a businessman. I tend to judge things by result. I'm going to read you an excerpt from the report. Ohio runs its Class 2 deep injection program on behalf of the U.S. EPA. As a result, the state meets and, in many cases, far exceeds U.S. EPA standards and regulations for the program since the program's inception in 1983. More than 200 million barrels of oil-filled fluids have been successfully disposed of, with no reports of subsurface groundwater contamination incidents. In addition, no seismic event had previously linked to operations at any of the state's Class 2 wells. I have some questions. Let's suppose that we could wave a wand and the federal government does end up administering this. I have some questions about the affirmative team's plans. What is your plan? How do you expect this to be a national referendum, or do you expect everybody to abide by a fiat, such as what the EPA is going to come out with in July of 2013. What specific disasters have occurred in Ohio and could have been prevented if the federal inspectors were involved and not just what we have now? You might also do your homework on the dedication of the inspectors. They have to get up at all kinds of odd hours and be away from their families to get the job done. A lot of the logic of this is what's called the precautionary principle, that the industry has to prove something isn't going to happen. It's impossible. It's like disproving a negative. So my question is, what assurance can we get that the federal legislation will not result in unintended consequences? I cite the No Child Left Behind Act as something that results in unintended consequences such as the teachers teaching to the test. What is your plan to integrate the federal inspectors and the existing inspectors? It looks to me like it's going pretty well right now. The state of Pennsylvania has just passed a law in September of this year by an overwhelming majority saying that they think that this should continue. And I think that what we've done here in Ohio, the new law has something like 183 pages of regulations, and it is being followed very closely. Madam Evaluator? Or, sorry, Moderator.
Rebuttal 2, Veronica Sanford for the affirmative. Veronica Sanford.
The negative team, and using some of its historic references, particularly with trains and with cars, have said that a lot of people had to die in order for us to get where we are today. Do we want a lot of people to have to die in order for us to get the regulations that we need? I think not. Let's think ahead. And although Joel had said that we were trying to prevent something that we don't know about, in fact, we do know that radioactive materials have been leaked into groundwater. They have been shown in Pennsylvania and in other states. Earthquakes have been caused not just in Ohio. So Texas and Louisiana, I believe, have also seen them. So this is not something new to Ohio. I'm not trying to say no fracking, no way. I'm saying let's add more regulation, and also let's add the funding for those inspectors. Right now, the inspectors on the ground in various states are so underfunded that they are not able to test to the existing requirements that they have in place today. They're supposed to test once every 5 years, and they're not even able to do that. So my question is, let's have the companies that are requesting the permits pay for this to make sure that they are following the rules that are already in place and that we have the safety that we need. Madam Moderator.
Rebuttal number 3, Keatan Suri for the negative.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Shankar. Very important point I want to bring in again, and we are going back and forth on the state and federal. Yes, let's look at the biggest disaster we had in the recent times. That was Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Yes, it was regulated by federal, and as a result of it, from the news, it said, after Deepwater Horizon explosion, a 6-month offshore drilling of moratorium was enforced by United States Department of Interior. This is exactly what I was trying to put. Do we need a broad brush to swipe through everything? Do we understand that there are differences between the ecological systems in different states? And all those systems should be regulated by one law at the federal? Probably not. What we are trying to say is, if state owns it, we know it better. If federal owns it, it's kind of a broad brush. And going back to the important point that Shankar and Veronica both put in from Pennsylvania, yes, we have seen some disasters. But does that mean that everywhere else fracking was banned? Or there was a moratorium for next 6 months of not doing these operations? No. That is exactly what the point is. If it is federal regulated, it's a broad swipe. They look at it, every operation through one glass. And that is what we do not want. The good point, which my friend Joel brought in, is look at it the other way around, right? Are we trying to say if we send everything to federal, there will be more bureaucracy? Veronica said the state inspectors are underfunded. How can we ensure that if we send this to federal, will they be more funded? No. The situation for funding inspector remains the same. But on a personal level, I want to put in, if I am an inspector, do I want to fly from DC to California every other day? And do I need to understand how California is built? Or I just take a book and say, these are my laws, and this is what you are going to abide. It may or may not be correct for that ecological systems. My dear friends, on the affirmative side have put a strong composition saying it should be regulated at the federal level. Going back to where Shankar started, on the 10th Amendment, he said that it is an federal law originates with Constitution, which gives Congress the power to enact statutes for certain limited purpose like regulating interstate commerce. And that is what Shankar said. But then, on the other hand side, let me read you the law for the state. The 50 American states are separate sovereigns with their own state constitutions, state governments, and state courts. Thank you.
Rebuttal number 4, Shankar Raswa for the affirmative.
Thank you, Sheila. Well, hello again. Thank you, Keatan. Thank you, Joel. They made a lot of points why the state should retain their regulatory power and not the federal. One of the critical points which Keatan made in his earlier speech was it is not economical. Seriously, Keatan? 50 states doing the same thing and one federal government doing one thing which is applicable to all 50 states, and still 50 times something is smaller than 1 times something? I don't think so. It's just simple math. He talked about BP oil spill and where the federal government did go wrong. I believe oil and natural gas is regulated at the state level, not at the federal level. And one of our great presidents said once, nobody's right all the time, and a broken clock is right twice a day. And all of us try to beat the broken clock by being right more than twice a day, at least. I'm not saying federal government is never wrong. Federal government has had its ways. But some of the greatest things, if you look at history, it is the federal government that brought us out of slavery. It is the federal government that put an end to Third Reich. It is the federal government that brought us out of Great Depression. These are not the state governments. The greatest things in this country have always come from the federal government. Now, Joel was mentioning about the hydrocarbon escape and the Youngstown earthquakes in Ohio, which is not really conclusively proved. I agree. In Pennsylvania, the rivers were polluted. studies do say that. Studies did prove that. A Cornell professor made an extensive study on it, and it is proved. They have found radioactive materials in Pennsylvania river waters. Where was Pennsylvania State for 10, 15, 20 years when fracking was going on? Why did they not come up with strict regulations to understand what are the long-term effects? They did not. So now the EPA has to again get back and come up with all these regulations. I am not saying federal government is the best one to regulate this. States have had their chance. They did not do a good job. So we have to go to federal government. In Dimock, Pennsylvania, they were literally able to light fire in a tap water because of excessive methane in it. The videos are there if you want to see it on YouTube. My friends would say it is still, again, not conclusively proved. I don't think so. So our stand is the federal government has always been on the side of the people. They have always done great things. History tells us that. State governments have failed in this issue, and there is nothing to do with 10th Amendment. That is because it is an interstate business. So it is very clear it is time for the federal government to take over, and they have been doing the right thing so far. They have, first of all, slowed down the process. In June, Ohio alone have issued 37 permits for fracking, and in May it has issued 20 permits for fracking. All these without conclusive results. So why did they not regulate this and slow down the process? Why did they issue the permits if the studies are inconclusive? Federal government is definitely playing a role in decelerating this whole hype about fracking. They are taking very cautious steps in understanding the long-term impact of this process. It is definitely the best way to go. State governments are becoming greedy of the money. In Pennsylvania, in 2010, one of the Pittsburgh mayor has said in his report that Pennsylvania has got $11 billion in revenues just because of fracking that year, and it is projected to go up to $20 billion by 2020. So there is a lot of money in this game, and that's why everyone wants to jump into fracking without doing proper research and proper homework on how to handle this issue. So I strongly believe federal government is the way to go. It is the one that will be good to regulate and have fracking under control in the long-term interest of our people. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila.
What future do you envision for yourself? What dreams do you have? If you want your dreams to come true, you must have confidence in yourself and your abilities. A Toastmasters Club can help you build that confidence. A low-cost learning experience for men and women. Toastmasters shows you how to express yourself clearly and effectively. Make your dreams a reality. Join a Toastmasters Club.
Well, everyone did such a good job. I would like each person to stand up and let us applaud them. And our 4 judges decided not on the merits of whether or not it should be federal or state, but who they believed did a better job of presenting. The debate winner is the affirmative team.
Thank you.
And thank you. And the negative team is a winner too. So, if you liked what you saw and you would like to learn more, TV Toastmasters is the place to go. So I'm going to call up the president of TV Toastmasters. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I see a woman with a package and 2 people over here standing up. Let me start that again. I'd like to call up Michelle Lewis, the president of TV Toastmasters.
Thank you. Many thanks to Sheila, a fantastic job of being the MC for today. I truly want to thank our participants in the debate today. It was extremely exciting, a little intense, and I honestly had no idea who was going to win, so it was a lot of fun. Thank you to ACE for joining us today in this debate. It was a lot of fun. Thank you to the judges. And I want to thank you to those who joined us in the audience, our guests, and for those of you at home. Please check us out. This is an opportunity for you to continue to work on your speaking skills, not our normal format, but this debate was another way for us to practice speaking, thinking on our feet, presentation skills. So just another fantastic way for Toastmasters to help you develop. You can find out more about both of our clubs. To find out more about ACE, go to 8119.toastmastersclubs.org. And to find out more about TV Toastmasters, you can go to tvtoastmasters.com. Thank you so much, and this concludes the Saturday, October 20th meeting of TV Toastmasters and ACE.